Napoleon, and the irony here is that Napoleon rose as a result of the French Revolution. Remember that France was mostly conservative in terms of being the king. They had King Louis XVI. Queen Antoinette was very famous for somebody, and it wasn't a true story, by the way, but somebody comes up to her and said, "The peasants have no food." And what was her supposed response? "But they have no bread." "They have no bread? Well, let them eat cake." You know, the idea is that there's so much variety that if they don't have any bread, well, then they just eat the cake, right? Well, what are they saying? They have no bread because they have no food, no money. And so the idea was that she was so far removed that she had no idea about the poverty. Now, just to let you know, not a real story. Didn't actually happen. But it's very famous. Hadn't you guys ever heard that? Okay, let them eat cake. It's very famous. Not real. Doesn't matter. The point is that France has this strong monarchy. Unlike England, 100 years earlier, the English overthrew their monarchy. And the aristocracy took over. And in the United States, we pretty much overthrew the aristocracy. But in France, nothing of this had happened. They were still monarchs in 1789. So they have a revolution. And at first, the revolution was just the parliament overthrowing the king. And it wasn't bloody at all, hardly. You had the storming the Bastille, you had a little uprising, but mostly very sane. And the people who had money and some wealth and education were saying the king needs to be removed, we need to go back to an aristocracy, kind of like England. Well, within about a year or two, some of the academics, I'm going to blame university professors because that's pretty much what happened, started rallying up the people and saying, things haven't changed for you. You need to stand up and make a change right now. Instead of going reform, which means you go through the system, we want radical change, which means we want to tear everything down. And that's what you think of as the French Revolution. It's the second half of the French Revolution. We usually refer to it as the Reign of Terror. And that's really when they started rounding up anyone who had any money and killing them. The guillotine was invented. The guillotine was invented to kill people faster. Because remember, before that, you don't have guns, firing squads that you can do this quickly enough because you have to fire it every time. So you just chop off their heads, how they were executed. But if you think about it, one big axe, it's hard to do that. You have to sharpen it all the time. And what if you miss? Or if it's dull, you have to keep whacking at it. And it's grotesque. But if you're dealing with hundreds a day, this is a very real problem. So they invent the guillotine with a cool little slanted blade. Cool in a really disgusting way. But because of the weight happens every time, right off. And so they can literally kill hundreds of people in a day, which would take ages. Because their list of people that were criminal was outrageously high. Not only did they kill the king and his wife, anybody who had a title was suspect. Anybody who had lands that weren't willing to give them up were suspect. Religious folks were suspect. They wanted to destroy the system. Now, this caused fear everywhere. Because there's crowns everywhere. So if it can happen in France, it can happen anywhere else, right? And so immediately they started attacking France. Everybody attacks France. Because the whole idea was radical. And in the midst of this attacking, Napoleon rises up as a guy who's a really good cannoneer. He knows how to deal with cannons. And he is able to push back attacks on Paris. In the process, he's able to kind of help restore order. The radicals are kicked out. The reformers kind of come back in. They're still revolutionaries, but they're not the ones that are trying to kill everybody. By the way, the guy who started the revolution also lost his head, Robespierre. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. You could say this is the example of what happens when you pursue rule of power. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? So Napoleon rises up. Here's the irony of irony. Napoleon rises up in the midst of a revolution designed to overthrow the king, and within about 6 years, what happens to him? He becomes emperor. He gets crowned king. Not just king, but actually emperor at a higher level than King Louis XVI was. And everyone supports him. Why? Because he's really good. And he takes over all of Europe. And he keeps pushing this direction. And in 1812, he actually pushes into Russia. You guys ever watch Princess Bride? there's two fatal blunders. The most obvious one is don't start a land war in Russia. What's he talking about? Well, because Napoleon goes into Russia with 600,000 people, and he leaves with 40,000. And when he leaves, he actually leaves his 40,000 behind, and they have to follow. He just flees. Don't start a land war. It's actually don't start a land war in Asia, but that's what they're talking about. The point is that Napoleon has taken over all of Europe except, and then he goes into Russia. Now, this is important for World War I because Russia thinks that they defeated Napoleon. What actually defeated Napoleon? The winter. What Napoleon did was that he went in, and all the Russians did was they just moved. So when he goes into a city, they all fled the city. And they burned things behind him. So when he gets to the city, there's nothing there. So he goes on to the next city, he finds that it's also burned. And the Russians are the ones that burned it. Now they're destroying things, but why would they do that?
So that can't resupply.
Yeah. Can't get the supplies. And so by the time Napoleon's in the middle of it and it's winter, he's got no shoes for his men, no food, they start starving. That's why you're losing 500,000, 560,000. They just die from the elements. And that's why he flees, because he can't supply them. This is important to understand because Napoleon, who takes over all Europe, Russia thinks, and the rest of the world thinks, nobody can defeat Russia. Napoleon defeated everybody else, but didn't defeat Russia. What does that make Russia feel like?
They're invincible.
They're invincible. Very important to understand. Okay. It's not true, by the way. These are all the little things of Germany. Where do you see the word Germany? You don't. Okay. These are all the little things of Italy. Where do you see the word Italy? You don't. Up until 1860, there is no Germany, there is no Italy. So when Napoleon is defeated, who actually defeats Napoleon, by the way? I know he loses a big army in Russia, but who is it?
The English.
It's English, right? And what happens, Napoleon comes out of Russia, he gets defeated. They send him off to an island to scrub rocks, and after about a year, his people go take him off the island. He goes back to Russia, France. He builds up another army. He goes out, and he gets defeated. And what's the big famous name of the battle that he gets defeated? Waterloo. And so when somebody says, "This is my Waterloo," what does that mean? Final battle. Who loses? Napoleon loses. Who wins? England. From this point, major power struggle between England and France for years and years. France is defeated. Who is the power of the world?
England.
England. Go ahead.
Was he much less powerful at that second time?
He was less powerful just to begin with. But also, he just didn't have... the opponents, England, was just way better at what they were doing by this time. I mean, they were better. So, he's going to be defeated. The point is that when the war is over, England puts in a new puppet government in France. So they have a king, but he's not going to be strong. He's never going to be strong. France will never again be strong. Today, we don't think of France like the main military power in the world, right? We kind of make fun of him a little bit. It's okay. We shouldn't, but we do. So France is never going to be strong. England is powerful. Who else is powerful? Well, there's nobody here. So we assume Russia is kind of powerful because they helped to defeat Napoleon. But what's the threat of Russia in here? Nothing. So the point is that in 1815, you kind of establish a balance of powers. But England really is the most powerful because they're all over the world. If they're all over the world, are they really trying to influence Europe directly? No. Instead, they help France to kind of have an influence because they know that France can never be a military power. So what does this mean in plain language? Well, between 1850 and 1875, what two countries emerged?
Germany.
Italy and Germany. Prussia will become Germany. Austria is the Austrian Empire. That's still there, but it's going to be taken over. In order to be Germany, all the German-speaking people have to unite. I'll just be real blunt. They can't unite without war. And the guy who's in charge of Prussia uses war over and over and over again. He defeats his neighbors. He'll fight against France, and by fighting against France, he causes the Germans to want to come together. He's using war over and over again with the sole purpose of uniting. And in the end, they unite all these people under Germany. Austria doesn't join. Why doesn't Austria join? Austria has the title of Holy Roman Emperor. The head of Austria is an emperor. Why do you think he doesn't want to join Germany? Yes! It's Prussia who's doing all this. If they go in, they cease to exist. That's why you get Germany and Austria. But in fact, what language do they all speak? German. They're all German. In terms of the people, they're all German. But Austria doesn't want to be a part of it. Is this going to be a big deal? Kind of. Italy in 1860 is going to be the first one to unite. And there's all sorts of little states. You've got this guy who's like Italian, I want to be the next Rome, and then you've got more of a pragmatic guy. Remember we talked about pragmatism, practical? So he's willing to use this kind of nationalism, romantic nationalism, in order to unite. And how do they unite? What's going to happen to unite? War, over and over and over again. Well, 1860 they unified. Same thing is going to happen in Germany. All these countries are going to unify through constant war. What's the United States doing when we see all this?
They're isolated.
Okay. Austria, throughout all this conflict, just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And so by the time we're done, Austria actually breaks into parts. It used to be called the Austria-Hungary Empire. So what happens? Hungary breaks off. Austria, Bohemia, Moravia, Slovakia. What is this one? Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Sarajevo. There's one in here that is not going to pop up yet, but it will pop up. You know what I'm talking about? Which one I'm talking about? What is Serbia? This is where Franz Ferdinand gets killed. Okay, we got like 5 minutes here to make sure you understand. If you look at the big map, Russia is trying to get bigger, and it thinks it's very powerful. Germany is bigger. And at the time, at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, it wasn't even thought of because it didn't exist. But by 1870, it is now a massive, powerful kingdom. And how did it get that way? Through constant war. So what does its military look like? It's a very, very powerful, high-technology military. In 1900, they have airplanes, they have tanks, they have machine guns, they have poison gas, they developed submarines. That's how they united, was through constant war. So Germany, very powerful. What's happening in Austria-Hungary? It's getting weaker and weaker. And what's happening is that Austria is just falling apart. Now Turkey is also falling apart, which means that you have all these little countries that didn't exist 50 years earlier. What does that mean? Well, they're new, young countries, but what does that make them vulnerable to? Being taken over. And who really, really wants to take them over?
Russia.
Because what does Russia want more than anything?
Warm water port.
A warm water port. So you can see where this is a problem. Does Germany... Go ahead. Oh, I thought you had a hand. Does Germany want Russia to have that warm water port?
No.
Germany is also brand new, and it wants to establish itself as a major power. What about England? Does England want Russia to have the warm water port?
No.
No. But does England want Germany to be happy that Russia doesn't get that warm water port? So who is England going to like more, Germany or Russia?
Russia.
Russia. England is going to be busy fighting both sides, supporting the Turks against the Russians, and then supporting the Russians against the Germans. And because England's got its fingers all over the world, they can do things like that. Balance of power. It's not about ideology, it's about doing what needs to be done. Now we can see where World War I comes up here, right? Because it's in here that the heir to the head of the Austrian throne gets killed. Franz Ferdinand is the Archduke. We don't know this because we don't have titles. Archduke means he's the next guy in line. And he's the head of the Austrians. Well, for years, the Russians have been helping the nationalists, Serbian nationalists, because Russia wants all these guys to be independent. Because what will eventually happen? If they're all really independent, if Austria is kicked out of all these things, then who can they turn to?
Russia.
Russia, and then Russia can go through just as they wish. So they've been supporting the Serbian nationalists, people that want to kick out the Austrians. And where does this Archduke get killed? In Serbia. By who? A Serbian nationalist. And so who do we blame for the killing? Russia. Does Russia actually orchestrate this? No. Does that really matter? No. Because what you have here is a situation where everybody wants change. Germany wants to be respected as the main power in Europe, not France and not England. England is all over the world. Why should they be in Europe? France was defeated in the Napoleonic Wars. Germany wants to be the next guy. They fought all these wars in order to unite. Now they want to be able to expand a little bit. And they don't necessarily want to take over. They just want to be respected as the power in Europe. Russia thinks it already is the power in Europe. They want this warm water port. Austria is losing things day by day, and they don't want to lose any more. Turkey does not want Russia to go through here because Turkey has constantly been fighting Russia. But they don't like the Austrians either. But they would rather support the Austrians to prevent Russia from going through than allowing Russia. England, who is focused on the world, doesn't want things to change. And so England, kind of like the pacification model, is trying to support Russia to keep Germany down. It's a balance of power. Very conflict. What does it really mean? Everybody wants war. When the Archduke is assassinated, nobody thinks really that Russia did this. But Austria asked Germany, will you support us if we get in a war with Russia? Germany says yes. Will you support us if we get in a war with France? And Austria says yes. And so, okay, this will be an opportunity. You can attack Serbia because you know that Russia will support them. That will end up getting you in a war with Russia. Ottoman and Austria will both attack Russia at the same time. And Russia will attack both of these guys. While they are now busy, Russia cannot stop Germany from attacking France. They're going to go through Belgium, go into France. And their hope is to get France ripped out so quickly that England does not have a chance to cross the channel and be there. And when they're done, in 6 weeks, the war will be over. Of course, on the other side are the English, who said this is a perfect opportunity to put Germany back down in its place. We can use this opportunity to kind of test the boundaries of Russia, let them expand a little bit in order to push Germany back down. We have a big military, we're the biggest empire in the world, we can do this in 6 weeks, it's over. Russia says, this is our chance, we can finally get a warm water port. If we attack, we can probably plow all the way through and have Russia right there in the Mediterranean. We defeated Napoleon, we can defeat anybody. 6 weeks war. What actually happens?
Doesn't last 6 weeks.
The military technology is way more advanced than anybody understands. Russia is well under advanced. Had no idea what they were up against. They are being creamed by both the Austrians and the Ottomans, but both of these guys, all three of them are low tech. So they're fighting and they're dying by the thousands and thousands. Germany and England are way more overpowered. England gets into France before Germany even knows it. They get stuck in Belgium, and so they fight a trench warfare that lasts for years. And the death tolls are astronomical. More English and French die in World War I than in all of World War II. Go ahead.
Don't you need like a 3-to-1 ratio?
You need a 3-to-1 ratio to defeat a defensive army, and they are 1-to-1. And so it just means you're just going to kill and kill and kill and kill. This is the war. Now, before the war starts, the United States looks at everybody and says, you don't need to fight. We just sit down and check it out. We'll find out who actually killed the Archduke. We talked to Germany, France, and England. You don't need to fight. There's nobody even threatened in here. And we all got letters back. And I read these letters. Notes, very short, about 2 or 3 sentences. And they said to the United States, we appreciate your concern. We appreciate your offer to help. No, thank you. Why? Because they wanted this war. So when Europe erupts in war, the United States immediately says, we're not involved. Why?
Because of George Washington's.
Because of George Washington's, but even more bluntly than that, we look at this as a battle over empires, and it's corrupt. The United States doesn't believe in that. Now we're going to talk about this a little bit on Monday, just a little bit. Because in the end, I already told you the story, the United States does get involved with this war. Not because they want to, but because their ships get blown out. And they said, we'll get in this war as long as we can promise to completely change the world order and put democracy. So no more balance of power, no more treaties, none of this stuff. People have a right to exist just as they are. Unfortunately, with the Treaty of Versailles, we thought that we got conned. We'll talk about this. But the point is that the idea of law enters into the vocabulary. It doesn't get taken until we see Hitler rising up and we see the power of this rule of might, and we cannot do this. Because if we keep having rule of might dominate the world, how many wars are we going to have? Every 20 years there'll be another world war. We can't do that. And so then the American view takes ascendancy, and that's what dominates Cold War. Questions? Comments? Or would you listen? We'll see you guys Monday. Monday? Monday.